Hey everybody and welcome to the next session at Rekindled. We were doing Understanding the Self, which is the first unit, and the A part, What Makes Me I. This is part 3 of What Makes Me I. We have already covered in two videos, first, second and third part of A, What Makes Me I. We have dealt with the sense of self, selfhood, identity, development of self and self during infancy, childhood and adolescence. Now what is left is sense of self and identity, the influences on identity formation, that is physical, biological changes, sociocultural context, emotional changes and cognitive changes. As usual, I'll again say, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, just go and subscribe it. It's the biggest motivation you can give me. And go and get your copy and pens, notebooks, so that you can make the notes side by side. By the time you have watched the video twice, the first time you watch it, then you make the notes, you are prepared for your test or your evaluation. So we'll be doing the influences on identity. This video might be a little longer because lot many aspects are to be covered. The influences of identity, how do we develop a sense of identity? We have already done that we are not born with a sense of selfhood or identity. If you have forgotten, just go back to the first video where we discussed that a child is not born with any self-identity. Each person lives in a web of relationships. We have family, school, workplace, community. See, this one individual plays different roles. Here he is a professional, here he might be a teacher. He is with children, he has his own hobbies, he is part of a club, family. So the sense of self develops as a result of interaction with people around you and through your action. A sports person could be different than a teacher. Your profession, your friends, they play an important role also. So self is a continuous and a dynamic process. It keeps on evolving day to day. So the first teacher, who is your first teacher? It's obviously the parents, your family. And what do you learn? The first thing, parents address you by your name. The next time a parents call a child, it could be Golu, Molu, anything, the child starts responding. Then they are taught the body parts, they look into the mirror, they can say, this is I, this is my hand, and the child gradually learns to see himself separate from others. Then they also understand that actions have effect on the environment. Experiences help a sense of being separate from other people and objects around you. When a child sees that this car is moving, he realizes that when he touches this, he pushes it, it moves. झुंझुने होते हैं ना, तो उसको if they move it, if they shake it, they will create a sound, and by they again and again they move it and create a sound. So the parents encouragement, it plays a very important role. A child can talk, the parent asks him to give the reasons, why did you do this, how do you feel, and by this they understand what is the reason behind the actions of the child. They learn by their own experiences, they have their own definition of the self. Now encounters with the people and objects around them, they develop an idea about their abilities. The feedback given by others about his behavior, they create a sense of identity. This sense of identity through verbal and social interactions. For example, see, these two children, after they have cooked something, or they have eaten with their parents, these two kids, they clean up the table. The parents say, and the parents see it and they say, wow, you are very good boys, you have cleaned the table on your own. The children will be motivated and do it further. Now another example, suppose you are very good at drawing when you are young. You draw a sun and a moon, you take it to your parents and they say, come on, I don't have the time. What, you keep on wasting the papers, just keep it there. The next time you'll think before drawing that I'm wasting a paper. My parents will not like it. So your encounters with people, they shape your identity. So developing a self of sense and identity. This is very important. Reasons for a unique identity. Every person has a unique identity, and every person is unique because we have a unique combination of genes which we inherit from our parents, except for the identical twins. But even identical twins are very different depending upon their experiences in the environment. If they have good friends, parents, the experiences are different. So they all have different experiences, and even if they have some similar experiences, they respond in a different way. For example, you might scold a child. One of the child may say, "तुम तो रोज यही करते रहते हो," and another would be very disturbed by it. He might be perturbed. So they would respond in different ways. Developing a sense of self and identity. This influences your formation of identity. These influences are biological and physical changes, socio-cultural context including family and peer, emotional changes, and cognitive changes. So we are going to deal with all these four kinds of changes. First, we begin with the biological and physical changes. All of you know that during adolescence also you have biological and physical changes. So universal physical and biological changes are there in the body, and these lead to attainment of sexual maturity. This is most predominant in adolescence. Now let's also see a few definitions, because you might get any of these in one markers. The first is puberty. It means the time when sexual maturity is reached. That is puberty. Then you have menarche, that is the first menstruation in the girls, and it is usually considered the point of sexual maturity for girls. This is the place where you identify that girls have started sexual maturity, but there is no such point for boys. Pubescence, this is the period during which physical and biological changes occur, and these lead to puberty. So pubescence, it leads to puberty. But I told you menarche, there is no corresponding definite event which marks the puberty in boys. Menarche marks puberty in girls, but nothing is there in boys. Most commonly it is thought that the age when most rapid growth comes just before menarche for girls, and before the before the achievement of adolescence in puberty in boys. Now let's see the physical changes which are there in the adolescence. The physical changes in girls, they start around 10 to 11 years when they have initial enlargement of breasts. Then they have pubic hair which start growing. Their voice start changing. For girls it is high pitched, and for boys it becomes deeper. The figure of the girls, they have broader hips. The shoulders are narrower, whereas in boys the shoulders are broader than the hips. The girls, they have more fatty tissues, and the boys, they have more muscular tissues. You can also include it. The fatty tissues are more in girls, and the boys, they are more muscular, and that is why they have different in strength. The age of maximum growth is different for girls and the boys, and in adolescence is the rate of maximum growth for both girls and boys. Growth of auxiliary hair in other body parts. And when you talk of boys, this age of physical changes, it begins at around 11 to 13. ज़्यादातर 1 या 2 साल का gap होता है, and it begins with the growth of testes and pigmented pubic hair. The voice changes, I told you, it becomes deeper. The first ejaculation of semen, it marks puberty, and the growth of auxiliary hair, development or mustache or beard. These are the physical changes. All of you must have undergone through them. Then we come over to the socio-cultural context. The physical changes in the body and also accompanied by the changing social expectations, and these two changes, the physical and social expectations, are the two main aspects which influence the identity formation during adolescence. Now, social cultural context, it includes how cultural and social context influence adolescent development, the influence of the family, whether the family is encouraging it's a broken family, or there are constant fights within the families, nobody is interested in the child, or it is the single child. It depends on the family. Why socio-cultural context is very important, the construction of self. The impact of cultural influences, it varies from family to family and from person to person. So the interactions with the friends, the families, these interactions, they play a very important role in the development of self. See, the self is different. This girl, she looks older than the boys. She might not be. It's just that the girls, they become adolescent, they reach puberty faster than the boys. So in Indian families, let us compare the environment in different kinds of families. In Indian families, the restriction on girls are more. Boys have more freedom of movement, and the girls, they are restrained within the four walls of the house. Now, in Indian families also, this is the general trend, but let's see the difference between rural and the urban family. In rural families, generally what happens is adolescents, they begin to contribute to the family income. They begin to assume adult roles. For example, if it is a farmer, they might help their parents in farming. If it is an artisan, the children start helping them. But still, they do not break away from the family. They stay in the family and all their incomes are aimed for the family welfare. Whereas an urban family, the adolescents are still dependent on the family. They are still under the influence of the family. They may, being dependent on the family also, they may leave the family to study, for trainings, for jobs, and even if they are earning something, it is generally for their own use and not for the use of the family. Now, again, we have two more types of families. It could be traditional families where you have family occupation, or you can have varied or contemporary occupation. Earlier, most earlier, generally we had only traditional and family occupation families, but with the development of industrial revolution and technology, most of the people now are in service sector, especially in the urban families. In the traditional occupation families, the people or the adolescents are not technologically aware. And because they are not technologically aware, they don't have exposure to the various opportunities which are available. And so their occupational opportunity is limited. They assume adult roles they take drawn from their family sources. They take up the profession of their parents or their families, and so they have fewer confusions. They are not confused that what am I going to do, what will I do, what subject will I take, because they know if my father is a weaver, I will also become a weaver. If my father is a farmer, I'll take over it. If my father has a store, I'll take over it. So they assume the role of adults early because they start contributing to the family income and family roles. Whereas in contemporary occupations, the children are more technologically advanced, they have more exposure, and so they have wide occupational choices. These choices are dependent on the parents, adolescents, their exposure, schools, teachers, and so they also have conflict with the parents. Parents might say you take science, and the child will say, no, I am good at arts, I'll go take fine arts. So they have conflict with the parents, and their adulthood is delayed because they are still studying, they are dependent on the family, they still don't have your careers chalked out, they are still learning, and experiences they might have to study for quite a few years and then go in for a profession. Next, we move over to Western versus Indian culture. In Western culture, generally the adolescents, they become independent fairly early. There is less interference of the family. They move away from the family and they set up their own home. From adolescence onwards, they might work as a waiter in the stores, restaurants, and they discuss freely about self and identity. They are free to take their own decisions. Can you think of this in the Indian families? No. Here, the adolescents are dependent on the parents, the family exercises control, and you are always expected to be with the family. Here, the adolescents are not encouraged to have open reflection about your own self, and even if you try to say, the parents will say, "Oh, क्या हो गया? तुम कितना बोल रहे हो?" So they generally don't say anything about themselves. जैसे एक example हम लेते हैं, they'll say, in our family, marriages are arranged by the parents. Rather than saying, I want my parents to arrange the families, their priorities are they put their families first. So the family or peer influence, it's very important. The adolescents, they develop a strong sense of support and acceptance from the peer. They also have their conflicts, and if values in conflict, the adolescents lean more towards your friend. आप भी ऐसे ही करते होगे ना, अगर parents से लड़ाई हो गई तो you talk with your friends. And the result is it creates disharmony in the parent and child relationships. This peer pressure, this impact can be both positive and negative. If your friends are very serious, you are not, it's quite possible that even if your parents are not encouraging, you might start studying very hard. And if your friends, they indulge in harmful behaviors like smoking, drugs, alcohol, it has negative impacts. So positive effects, जैसे अभी मैंने, I just took an example, this, if your friends were volunteering during this COVID, helping people with the requirements, you might also have joined them. This is positive impact. The family environment, it promotes both individuality and connectedness. It is very important for the identity development of the adolescent. This individuality, it offers you greater opportunity and ability to have one's own point of view, and this is your individuality. You can have your own point of view, but still there is connectedness, there is greater sensitivity and respect for others' view and openness to the views of others. So you respect the views of others and you also are open to accept them if you feel that they are right. The third changes which are important are emotional changes. The adolescents, they often feel very oversensitive, and it is the result of the biological and physical changes. They remain irritated, they remain depressed, and the reason is the drastic changes which are happening everywhere around them and inside them. They are looking for their identity. They imagine that everybody else is noticing them and every behavior, their body and their behavior, they are being dissected by everybody. This is what they feel. It's not necessarily true. They feel uncertain. They are not very comfortable with the way they have physically developed, and this positivity to the adolescent self or sense of self, the responsibility which is increasing on them day by day, they are very uncertain that they'll be able to bear it. They feel conscious about their selves, the way their bodies are changing, the way they look at themselves in the mirrors, and peer pressure obviously it creates so many problems, and it's also a problem solver. It influences your likes or dislikes. Many of you might have undergone a change in your eating habits. Dostos ke saath you must have enjoyed your coke, pizzas, noodles. Your parents might say it's very unhealthy, but it's the peer pressure. So conflicting thoughts are there, dissatisfaction with the appearances, your self-image, esteem. It creates insecurity in the adolescence. It results in mood swings, sometimes frequent and sometimes extreme changes of moods. Very extreme sharp bursts of anger, and you might be happy also. घर में दरवाजा पटक के मैं खाना नहीं खाऊंगा. So these are mood swings. And sexual feelings, hormonal changes, it results in attractions toward the opposite sex and lack of knowledge about the sexual changes. It also creates conflict. And finally, you have the cognitive changes, that is the mental development. It impacts the development of sense of identity. During early childhood, the child develops from a person with no sense of separate identity to one who describes oneself in concrete sense, and later in which sense? First, he had no identity, then he described himself in concrete and absolute terms, then he started describing them in terms of activities, and then abstract. So by the time the child and adolescence, the difference in descriptions is that they are now comparative. They are able to differentiate between the real and ideal self. We covered it in the previous video. The impact of cognitive changes is that comparative self-description from no self-identity to concrete identity. ऐसे ही develop हुआ था ना, पहले कोई sense of identity नहीं था, फिर concrete and then abstract. They differentiate between real and ideal self. Self-descriptions are fairly realistic. I'm friendly, I'm loyal, I'm very short-tempered. They can also do abstract thinking. They can think beyond what they can see, what their senses tell. For example, when you talk of a child who is in middle childhood, तो आप उससे कहोगे गाय के बारे में लिखो, talk about the picnic you have. But now they can think about more abstract things which are not there in front of them. They can think if 5 years from now, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? They can be more logical, they can be more formal. They can do hypothetical thinking. Hypothetical matlab, they can imagine various possibilities and their outcomes. If I do this, the result will be this. If I do this, the result will be this. If I do this, the result will be this. So this is something they are just thinking logically without necessarily having to go through them or act all of the steps for any outcome. So this is hypothetical. You imagine a situation, put yourself, and then think logically. They can take their career decisions, think of the possible careers and plan accordingly. Now you can imagine if you want to be a teacher, what do you want to do? If you want to go in the army, law, what is it that you are supposed to do? The reason from known principles to forming own ideas or questions. अगर parents कहेंगे कि कल fast करना है, you can say why? क्यों? झाड़ू नहीं लगानी है, क्यों नहीं लगानी है? तो you can question, you have your own ideas. And they also have their roles. They want to imagine their roles. They want to have their identity in the world. They see higher ethical and moral standards as a result of questioning the rules. When we are all adolescents, we have very high energies. We want to have the society. We want to be the harbingers of change. We want to bring about change in the society. As you grow older, you realize that the system is much bigger than you, and you surrender a few times and you fight against it for a few times. And they imaginatively link up their present with the future. They imagine, they take steps accordingly. So this was all about the formation of self. I hope it is clear and you are also able to define what you think of yourself. In the next video, we'll be talking of, in the next lesson of Unit 1, we'll be talking about food and nutrition. So see you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye. If you have liked it, do subscribe it, give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and do comment in the comment box. Don't forget to press the notification bell for all the new videos. See you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye.